So in this video, we're going to be talking about the Mystic 8, which is the latest IEM from Letshuoer. It is priced at $1,000 and from the name, it is of an 8BA config. This thing definitely has very good reception overall, but I have my takes. As always with my videos, all the brands have nothing to do with whatever I'm talking about. I could say thanks to the people who lent it to me. In this case, again, thank you Heng for sending these pair my way so that I could give you guys an honest review. And with all that being said, y'all know my shtick. Unboxing time. Now the box as it is a very standard box with a sleeve. The sleeve is silver and accented with the graphics that you will be seeing on the faceplate later. And when you open it, you will be seeing a slogan. The slogan reads, "Experience the charm of music with Letshuoer." And in my personal opinion, I would definitely say that this makes a lot of sense considering that, you know, I am very amazed with the S12, still remember the sound till today, as well as the DZ4. Taking away the sleeve, you get to open two double doors, magnetic doors, and one side houses the IEMs on top with the case underneath, and the other side, we'll get into it in a bit. Usually when we talk about Letshuoer, the cases that they come in is reminiscent of like a hockey puck, those puck types, those screwing caps type of case. They decided to change it here, and I don't know why. This thing really reminds me of one of those, like, you know, camping tumblers. But personally, I would prefer this over the screw-ons because the screw-ons are a little bit finicky. Sometimes you lose your grip and it falls down and you get scratches on the case, which is not what we like. And in the other place, you get a small box that writes Mystic 8 gift, which we'll go into in the next second. You also get a cleaning cloth from Letshuoer. You also get 3 sets of tips as usual, and, you know, some basic paperwork. Now, in terms of the Mystic 8 gift, this is where I really have no comments. I don't really know how to review stuff like this. I review IEMs and technology, not necklaces and rings, man. But I guess there is that for the Mystic 8s. But what is not that for the Mystic 8 is what I'm gonna talk about right now. Again, this thing is a $1,000 IEM. And honestly, Letshuoer, what are you guys doing? I always praise Letshuoer for actually shelling out a lot in terms of, you know, their accessories, their peripheries. Y'all know at this point when we're talking about stock cables, they usually come with very beefy, very strong, rigid cables, which I personally associate it with some degree of quality. This thing right here honestly feels quite cheap. Like, I really dislike this cable. There's nothing else I would want to say other than I do not like this cable. With this type of feeling, the cable, the texture, yeah, I don't know what to say, man. But yeah, that's probably one of the cons that I would like to mention about Letshuoer's Mystic 8. But what I do want to mention as a praise is definitely the build quality of the head shells itself, as well as the fit. Now, this thing is made of a full titanium alloy, and as said just now in the beginning, the design is reminiscent of the packaging. You have a cat looking into a sky, and in the faceplate, you get to see cats looking into the sky. You can see that it is 2-layered. The cat is outside and there is gonna be an embellished layer inside. So definitely credits where it's due. The design team definitely has given this thing quite an amount of thought about it. And in terms of the fit, now this is one thing that I'm probably gonna go against the grain with everybody. It does have a very small amount of driver flex for me, but for my friend, they do complain that it has very significant amounts. Maybe because of a difference in ear anatomy, but all of us, regardless, talking about how little driver flex there is, we all praise the fit. The fit is very, very snug. The fit is very tight. It feels very, very good in the ear, and there is no fatigue after using this for around 1 to 2 hours for me. And with all that being said, let's actually talk about the main point of this video. Why y'all clicked on this? The sound quality. Probably why the hell did this guy decide to write this kind of title here? So this is gonna be the graph. As you can see, it is quite a more neutral type of tuning, and from listening, it definitely is that way with a very significant sub-bass boost and, you know, more elevated mids and up. And my first impressions on this is, again, let me just put a very small disclaimer. I know of the Mystic 8s. but I have zero idea about its configuration. So when I listened to this firsthand, I was like, why does this remind me a lot of the Kiwi Orchestra? Like, it really reminds me of that, but better. And that's when it hit me, the 8s. It is an 8BA config. So yeah, you get my point. This thing, in my first impression, is that this thing, even though as a BA set, is very, very good. I would say a more refined version of the Kiwi Orchestra. I don't remember the mids or the highs, but I definitely remember the bass being quite lacking. This thing solves that. Solves it in that area. But I wouldn't really call it solve, because this might be its own rendition. But anyways, neutral-ish type of tuning, slightly warm, and mids and pinna are a little bit more prominent once tracks get busier. That's kind of like the general consensus of this IEM. Going into a little bit detail right here, starting off with the bass. Like I say, it has a sub bass boost, it has a sub bass increase, and it is quite adequate for a lot of songs. For soul, for funk, for rap, for hip hop. Everything sounds quite adequate, because when it hits, it has enough rumble, it has enough texture to keep you going. But what does not keep it going is that it has very little lower to mid bass, as you can see from the graph just now. Everything sounds quite lean, quite dry, very, very flat. I don't really have any problems with it, because I am quite a neutral preference type of person. But the issue with this is that sometimes it might feel a little bit boring on the low end. And usually we talk about bass bleed. No. In this case, the bass gets bleeded by the mids, if it makes any sense. But overall, regardless of what I say, if we're talking about bass alone, the characteristics of the lower and mid bass is quite fast. Everything is quite crisp with very quick decays. And I would say resolution and definition of everything, the texture is still quite on par. But still, in terms of how lean it is, you know, sometimes when we talk about crossovers, and you can definitely hear, like, you know, there's a crossover between one frequency, there is gonna be like a border in between. The lower bass and the sub bass definitely has a very significant border. This is very obvious when you're listening to the intro of Mac Miller's Good News. But anyways, moving on to the mids, this is where everybody praises it for having very exceptional vocals. Me included, I am quite biased because it has my personal preference of an ideal tuning when I'm listening, as well as when I'm mastering music. Starting off with male vocals, everything sounds quite crisp. It has a level of bodiness to it, not extremely weighty, just right. Ever so slightly on the colder side, which is what I personally would like when I'm personally mixing things. So there's that for that. For the female part, definitely more body than the male vocals. And in my personal opinion, I think it's just right. It's not too aggressive in terms of how this thing presents itself for female vocals, but occasionally when you're listening to J-pop, it might sound a little bit shouty, it might sound a little bit too sibilance, mainly because of how, you know, as you could see in the graph again, some pinna overtones. This might be a preference thing, and I mainly listen to more J-pop when it comes to female vocals, so take that as you will. Positioning of the vocals is alright for me, but if you're talking about a neutral pair, it might be just ever so slightly recessed. But what is not recessed is everything else in the midst, the instruments. Overall, for the instruments, two keywords just come into mind: airy and dominant. These two are just gonna be the main focus of everything mids and up. Things overall sound bright and sparkly, which extends to the treble regions due to the fact that it carries a large amount of overtones. And for what I could listen for a few hours, strings and violins and guitars are extremely fulfilling and atmospheric, as you could hear. Keys as well are also quite prominent in terms of how lively it is, but for some reason, Sims are not really that lively. But as we go on to the upper mids and treble, given the fact that this is going to be a BA set, take this again with a very specific grain of salt. It isn't really a comfortable pair for me to listen, in my opinion, if you are basically listening to something that's mainly trap, metal, any genre that has a ton of percussions. But it is quite mix dependent. Like I keep mentioning throughout every of my reviews, the J-pop type of mixing is different from what we do. Sometimes things might sound a little too sharp, a little too shouty, similar, but then sometimes it might because of the mix. Me personally, I feel like this is a little bit of a hit or miss for me, because I can't listen to certain types of tracks that has too aggressive hi-hats. But other than that, I think overall it's quite good. Everything is still quite aggressive, everything punches you, everything is quite dominant to the front, so yeah. But again, like I said, since this is a more neutral pair with more mids and upper mid emphasis, occasionally, like I said about hi-hats, it might sound a little bit too forward, and it might drown a little bit of everything else. You could feel like it becomes the forefront rather than what you would expect from, like, you know, a track with vocals, a track with instruments, a track with guitar solos. But overall, I would say, regardless of anything, if you're listening to just instrumentals, I would say extension of it is quite good. And the mids owe a lot to this section, mainly because of the overtones that accompanies everything else. And this is where the hot take begins. Technicalities. Personally, I value technicalities a lot, but let's be very honest at this point. Some people don't really care about technicalities that much. Overall, I feel like the Mystic 8 is really trying its best to break into the market at the $1,000 kilobuck range with this specific tuning. I feel like they've actually missed a few steps in the technicalities part. Dynamics, in my opinion, is really a little bit lacking in terms of what you are paying for in this price point, because like I say, I'm a little bit confused about what they're trying to do with the upper mids and up. Sometimes hi-hats sound good, sometimes rides sound quite weird. I don't really know how to explain this. It really is a hit or miss depending on what you are trying to listen to. But again, this might be a little bit subjective, because as much as I want to say that I am very fond of the vocals, everything else is really quite weird for me. At the end of the day, I'm just gonna say this is quite subjective for what I'm gonna say from now on. But what is not subjective, what is, I would say, more objective, is the soundstage. When I first tried this on, I don't even know the price point. I was like, yeah, this definitely sounds like something along the lines of a $500 to $600 range IEM. Because mainly for me, when I'm blind testing things, I try to gauge stuff based on the technicalities first. And this thing gave me the soundstage where I would probably find it at around $500 to $600. That's where I'm getting it at. Like, don't get me wrong, this thing is not underwhelming, but it is underwhelming when you found out that this thing is almost half the price that what you estimated it to be. Imaging and separation for this price point definitely is spot on still, despite the soundstage. You can feel like everything is separated very clearly with a significant border. It is quite apparent when you're talking about the sub-bass rumble and you are having a definitive separation between that and everything else. But to give a little bit, or I would say a lot, back where credit is due, detail retrieval. I would personally feel like this thing saves itself due to the fact that it has quite a good tuning, with the fact that the detail retrieval complements its tuning very well. Macro details, overall, I don't have any complaints. When it comes to micro details, this is where everything in the mid-range is being pushed to the limit in terms of presentation, is being pushed to the limit in terms of intimacy, energeticness, atmosphericness. You basically get the idea. But anyways, in conclusion, as a $1,000 IEM, this thing definitely fills up a gap in that area with this specific tuning, but the technicalities is where it's getting me, man. I really feel very conflicted about the very good vocals, but everything else is a little bit of a hit or miss. But when we're talking about objectiveness, when we're talking about comparing it with other things, unless you really like this tuning and you don't mind the slightly less width that you're getting from the soundstage, because in my opinion, again, this thing sounds like it is as wide as something along the $500 and $600 range. If you don't mind that, everything else is good. But anyways, that is it for my review. Thank you for watching. I really hope I don't offend anyone, but this is my most unbiased review about Letshuoer's products. And again, y'all don't get me wrong, I like the DZ4, I really like the S12s. There are very good things from Letshuoer as well, but for this thing in particular, you know, maybe it's just not meant to be. Maybe I just don't have it with it. Yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys real soon.